Ricky, and I have the most obnoxious father of all time. My dad thinks he's the hottest man out there. He just doesn't know that girls are all over him because he's a millionaire. That's all. He brings a new girl every week, never the same girl twice. This week, however, he brought a very ugly woman, Shannon. She was thin like a paperclip, wearing too much makeup, and spoke like a drunk old woman. On our first meeting, she said to me, "Oh, I'm only sorry that you are 20 years younger than me." Ew! Then she and my dad laughed disgustingly. I didn't know why my father would date a woman like that. I mean, I'm used to him picking hot blonde 20-year-olds, like Shannon's daughter, Jessie. Jessie was so hot. She had the most gorgeous body and the most beautiful blue eyes you could ever see. I couldn't get my eyes off her. The four of us had dinner at an expensive restaurant. Dad said, "We should let the kids meet before we go over anything serious." What? I hope that Dad is not planning to marry Shannon. I want to date Jessie so bad. If she becomes my stepsister, then it would be awkward and somewhat nasty. I couldn't ask him over dinner because I didn't want to embarrass them. But when the women went to the restroom, I leaned over and asked, "Hey, Dad, are you really going to marry Shannon?" And he responded, "Oh, hell no. I'm marrying her daughter, Jessie." My heart stopped. I screamed, "What? That girl is my age. You are 30 years older than her." And he said, "Oh, what do you know? It's my life. Plus, she likes me too. A lot." I felt sick to my stomach, and I felt disgusted with Jessie. Why would she do that to herself, marrying a thirsty old man like my obnoxious father? But when the women came back to the table, I noticed that Jessie was not herself. It was obvious that she had been crying. I also paid attention that her mom wasn't allowing her to speak. She finished all her sentences. When Dad asked Jessie, "So, where do you prefer the wedding to be?" Jessie was about to open her mouth to answer, but her mom immediately interrupted and said, "At the Four Seasons Hotel, of course." Jessie looked pissed, but she kept quiet, and I began to understand the whole thing. They are forcing her into marriage. I felt really bad for her. The next day, Jessie was at our place. She wanted to meet with the wedding planner to discuss wedding details. When they finished, I came into the room and asked her, "Why are you doing this?" She was quiet for a few moments and then said, $2 million. I gasped. $2 million? What do you mean? She explained, "My mom is making me do it. She's in debt and desperately needs the money to start over. Your dad is paying me $2 million to marry him for a few years." That sick, sick man. Then, unexpectedly, Jessie turned to me, kissed me passionately and said, "But I like you though. I want you. Can we do something about it?" I liked her too, so I kissed her again. When we finished, I said, "You know, we could run away." Her eyes lit up. "But we need money. I don't think we both have enough." I told her that I had a plan. "You should convince my dad to give you half the money before the wedding. That's the only way we could get away." Then she came closer and kissed me again, and said that she'll think about it. I was more determined to find a solution and run away. At night, I went to my dad's office to steal his money. I wasn't going to let him marry Jessie. I stole $20,000 from his safe and sent a message to Jessie asking her to meet me at the airport. We were very excited to get on the plane. We rented a small, cozy apartment to spend our time. When Jessie entered the bedroom, I had a bed full of red roses with candles waiting for her. She looked surprised, and before she said a word, I grabbed her and kissed her. By that point, I've been dying for this moment to happen. Jessie kissed me back and told me that she loved me. We took things to bed, and I guess you can figure out what happened after. Life was pretty sweet, until one day, I went out to buy some food, and when I got back, I didn't find Jessie. I called her and sent her messages on her phone, but she wasn't there. Where did she go? When I sat on the bed, I noticed there was a piece of paper there. It said, "Thank you for getting me out of there, but we are not meant for each other." I blanked for a few moments. She must be joking. I checked my bag, and she left me with $1,000. What? I got tricked by a witch. I sat on my bed thinking of what to do. $1,000 are not enough to cover my expenses, and I knew I could not go back to Dad. He would have probably figured out by now that I ran away with Jessie. I mean, we did disappear at the same time. I spent 2 days thinking about my situation when I noticed a wealthy lady entering the restaurant where I was having my lunch, and it hit me. Why can't I be a gold digger? I mean, girls do it all the time. And without any hesitation, I sought that woman. Her name was Janet, and she was 50 years old. I followed her for a week to know where she spends most of her time, and I started hitting on her. Then one time, when she was having coffee in the park, I sat next to her and said, "What a lucky cup of coffee." And she blushed, just like little girls. We started talking, and soon I was in bed at her house. We dated for a while before she asked, "Can you come and live with me?" "I'd be happy to," I said. So I ended up moving with her. She spent her money on me. She bought me all the things I need, including a brand new Mercedes. But then, 3 months later, Janet came to me and said, "I need you to come with me to a wedding." "Sure, babe," I said. "Anything for you." And we went there. And oh my God, it was my dad's wedding, to Jessie. How is that? I came close and Dad said, "Hey son, where have you been? I tried calling you several times. I thought you were on a trip or something." So Dad doesn't know anything about it? And then I looked at Jessie and said, "Hi, I hope you're happy about marrying my dad." She didn't say anything, but Dad responded, "Yeah, she is. And congratulations, you're going to become a big brother." Pregnant? She must be kidding. I couldn't believe her lies. She's been planning this all along. She wanted me out of the house so she could get the wealth all to herself and her new boy. I was furious. She manipulated both of us. I couldn't let that go by, so I decided to get revenge. During the party, I raised my glass and said, "Can I have your attention, please?" Everyone looked at me, including Jessie, who was really nervous. I said, "You know, Dad and I have the same taste. We even dated the same woman. She ran away with me for a week before she came back to marry him." Silence filled the room. Guests looked shocked. Jessie left the room. Dad looked angry and disappointed. I ruined the wedding for the second time, but I was proud of it. As bad as my dad was, he doesn't deserve to be fooled. This time, however, I was completely alone. I had to live on my own. Dad kicked me out of the house, and I had practically nothing, and Janet refused to take me back. I got a job and lived in a small apartment for 2 years before I heard the terrible news from my dad's lawyer. "Your dad passed away." Tears started falling from my eyes. I hadn't had the chance to make amends with him. But then the lawyer continued, "He left you all his money." I went back to our house and took over his company. In a few years, I became a very successful businessman. I got married to a beautiful woman and had 3 beautiful children. Life was going okay. But then, 20 years later, I was interviewing new employees for the company, and a handsome man called William showed up. After we finished the interview, I asked him, "You look familiar. Do I know you from somewhere?" He smiled and said, "I don't think so, sir, but you may know my mother. She's a successful businesswoman, too." "What's her name?" I asked. "Jessie Smith," he responded. Then he said, "Thanks for having me. I'll be happy to hear from you." Jessie? Did she get married? Wait, was she really pregnant at that time? Did I just meet my brother? I looked up her picture on Google, and yes, it was her. I had to know the truth, so I decided to meet her. I looked her up on the internet and went to her company. I told the secretary that I wanted to meet her, but without mentioning my real name. I went to her office, and when she saw me, she gasped and said, "What are you doing here?" "I just want to know the truth," I said. "Is William my brother?" She stared at me for a few moments and said, "Actually, he's your son." "You are lying," I screamed. And she responded coldly, "No, I'm not. I found out I was pregnant the same week we ran away. I hadn't had any relationships with your father." "Then why did you go back to marry him?" I asked. She sighed and said, "I didn't want the baby to have the life I lived. You didn't have enough money. I thought your dad was a better provider than you. He could buy me and the baby everything." I sat on the chair. I needed a moment to take that all in. "Does William know about this?" I asked in a shaking voice. She freaked out and said, "No, he doesn't. He thinks that his father is my husband who died 2 years ago. Don't you dare mention that to him." "Are you crazy?" You couldn't think of a better lie, I yelled. No, and I prefer keeping things the way they are, she yelled back. I got out of the office and called William and told him, hey, I hired you for the job. And here we are. My son is working for me. Every day I see him, but I don't have the courage to tell him I'm his father. Did you like my story? Please share your thoughts in the comment section below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more.
That was crazy. Really weird. So technically he thinks that his grandpa is his dad. But technically his grandpa died. And the woman sounds like a man. So
Together for 4 years. Our relationship has been perfect until we used a pregnancy test and found out that John was pregnant. During the last year, John started to change. He no longer called me, and he avoided me at school as well. I had to figure out what has been going on with him. So I sent him a message saying, did I do something wrong? And he replied, listen, I think that we should put an end to our relationship. If you really cared for me, you would have done the thing that would have made me happy. I wasn't ready to break up with John yet. He treated me well and has always been kind to me. I couldn't imagine my life without him. Without a second thought, I replied to his message. I will do what you want me to do, and that was it. I can't say that it was the best, but it was okay, I guess. I couldn't really tell. I've never been with anyone else before John. He also managed to convince me that there was absolutely no chance for me to get pregnant on the first time. Our relationship returned back to normal after we did it. I would even say that it became even better. But a month later, my period was late and I panicked. I called John and told him that I was pregnant. I couldn't find any other logical explanation for what was happening. But he only laughed and said that I was blowing the situation out of proportion and told me that he would buy me a pregnancy test and drop by. I agreed to a suggestion only on one condition. I told him he must bring 2 tests, not 1. When John arrived, I had absolutely no idea how to use a pregnancy test. I grabbed one of the tests and handed it to John and said, okay, you first. He looked at me and smiled and said, hey, pretty face. It seems that you've got the wrong idea. You are the one that has to pee over it, not me. It sounded like complete madness to me. All I wanted to know was if there was a baby in my uterus or not. John noticed how hesitant I was, so he grabbed the pregnancy test and went to the bathroom. A few minutes later, he came out with a look of confusion all over his face. He was hiding the test behind his back. He didn't want to show me the result he got until I take my turn and use the test as well. It took me some time. When I came out of the bathroom, he looked at my test and laughed. He said, see, you're not pregnant. Your period must have been a little late, that's all. Yes, these kinds of things happen from time to time, but why was he hiding his test? And why did he look confused when he saw it? I took the chance when he wasn't looking and stole his test. And what I discovered left me speechless. My test came negative, while his turned out to be positive. How could it be? How could John be pregnant? Didn't he just tell me that pregnancy test was meant to be used by females only? Oh my god. Did that mean my test was inaccurate? I panicked all over again. But John, trying to calm me down, told me that we could simply buy some more of those tests and try again. Oh god. But what other option did I have? John went to the pharmacy and returned with more of those test sticks, a big bottle of water, and 4 Coca-Cola cans. Because, as you probably know, we needed them so that we could go to the bathroom. We tried more than 20 test sticks. Every single one of mine came out negative, while every test stick that John used came out positive. Despite the situation being disgusting, I mean, it had to be, all that urine, ew, it was still funny. I looked at John and said, could it be that you are pregnant with my child? And we both broke into laughter. John even took a selfie with the dozens of positive pregnancy tests that he had. He then posted the photo to his Instagram account with the caption that said, it looks like I don't need a partner to be a dad. Yes, all these positive tests are mine. We spent the whole night reading comments and laughing, and most importantly, I finally got my period that night. On the next day at school, everyone gathered around us and asked, is it true that all those positive pregnancy tests were John's, or is it just a silly joke? But John answered with pride, yes, they are all mine. Knowing that everyone in school knew that John and I had sex still made me feel uncomfortable. It should have been a private experience that no one else but me and John should have known about. A few days after we had posted the photo, the cheerleading team leader approached me and informed me that the team had decided to cut me off, as they believed that it was not right to keep me in the team while I was pregnant. They believed that my belly would eventually get bigger, and I would look ridiculous dancing with my big belly and short skirt all at once. They would definitely be ashamed of me for that. I tried once and again to convince her that I wasn't pregnant, but she insisted that no one believed John's lie, and that was it. As you can probably see, my life took a turn for the worse. While John was enjoying his unrivaled popularity due to his wittiness, I was witnessing my life falling apart, one piece after another. More than 2 months passed by while I refused to speak to John. Even though I was the one who encouraged him to post the photo in the first place, I still blamed him for all that happened. At first, John did not care that much about speaking to me again. He even got himself a new girlfriend. However, during the last week, he started calling and texting me once again on a daily basis, but I never returned any of his calls or messages. I felt extremely mad at him. During gym class, John approached the gym teacher and told him that he will not be able to continue the class as he was feeling pain in his lower abdomen, but the teacher only looked at him in ridicule and said, first, your pregnancy test comes back positive, and now you're having your period. What is next? Will you grow a pair of breasts next? Poor John felt extremely embarrassed, and everyone distanced themselves from John. No one wanted to be friends with the guy who was slowly turning into a girl, but for me, I felt very sorry for him. I went to him and said, listen, you don't have to attract everyone's attention to be seen as an interesting person. You once were perfect in everyone's eyes. I wish you would stop acting weird and that you would return back to your old self. He started to cry out loud and said, no one wants to believe me, even you. At that moment, the mean cheerleading team leader approached us and said, hey, look at that. It seems that our hormones are confused. Please be kind to Mrs. John. That loser. She really stepped on my last nerve with her uncalled for comment. I jumped on her and started pulling her hair, but the coach held me and pulled us apart. He ordered us to go to the principal's office. On our way to the principal's office, I looked at my palm and saw a strand of her hair still stuck between my fingers, while John held tightly onto my other hand. I didn't want to leave his hand. I really felt like there was something going on with him. While we waited to be called into the principal's office, John looked at me and apologized for what had happened to me because of him. He was very upset because he made me choose between ending our relationship or having sex with him. He even told me that he was thankful for me because I stood up for him and it meant a lot to him. For a second, I thought that he was going to tell me that he was willing to give our relationship a second chance. And honestly, I was willing to do so in a heartbeat as well. But his new girlfriend walked in and ruined everything. Once she saw him, she jumped on him and they both shared a long, warm kiss. He didn't seem to mind one bit. Once again, I couldn't stay calm. It was too much for me to bear. I pushed her away from him and kicked him in the nuts. He screamed his lungs out and fell unconscious. A few seconds went by, and he was being carried to the ambulance that took him to the hospital. I was in knee-deep problems. I thought that final incident would definitely get me grounded for life. Over the course of the next few days, John was no longer to be seen around school, and I didn't hear anything about him. I know that I might look stupid to you, but I was worried about him anyways. I felt that I had caused him some serious problem when I kicked him, but I honestly never thought that my kick was that strong. I had to check on him, but how would I do so? His phone was off all the time. There was no other way. I had to go to his new girlfriend and ask her about him. When I asked her about John, she told me, that fool broke up with me, and I don't care what happens to him. He can go to hell. My back was to the wall. I had no other way to check on John than to go visit him at his home. And that was what I did. When I visited him, he looked even worse than ever. However, he was thrilled to see me and told me that kicking him in the balls was the best thing that has ever happened to him, and that if I hadn't kicked him in the balls, he would have been doomed for sure. Despite that, he told me that he was totally desperate. He had lost his testicles for good. Everything finally started to make sense. John's pregnancy tests were indeed positive, but that wasn't because the tests were bad. It was because John was suffering from testicular cancer. The pains he had been suffering from weren't made up by him so that he could get more attention from people around him. They were very real. Testicular cancer? That must be the worst thing that could ever happen to any guy. What started as a joke ended as a disaster. Not only that, but also the only way of treatment for his case was the complete amputation of his testicles. I promised myself that day that I will never let John face all that on his own. Despite the fact that he had left me all alone before, this was totally different. I was with him when he went to surgery to get his testicles removed. All of that worked in our favor. With his testicles removed, there was no way at all that he would get me pregnant. He feels that our relationship has become perfect and stress-free.
Well, guys, that was the end of the video. I've watched 2 weird videos. It's weird. But hit the bell, subscribe, like, comment at Life of Jesus World.